Hey friends, how's it going? The movie opens in Holland, a quiet town in Michigan known for its Dutch roots and its famous Tulip Festival. We're introduced to Nancy Vandergrift, who is clearly on edge. She rummages through her jewelry boxes, growing more frustrated by the second. One of her earrings is missing. Convinced it didn't just disappear, Nancy turns her suspicion toward their young nanny. She pressures the girl to admit if she's taken anything. The nanny, confused and nervous, apologizes, not for stealing jewelry, but for eating some of their bacon. Nancy hints that something else is missing, but the girl doesn't understand what she's being accused of. This only angers Nancy further, and without any proof, she fires the nanny on the spot, leaving the girl shocked and humiliated. Once she's gone, Harry, Nancy's son, explodes. He lashes out at his mother, calling her unfair, especially since the nanny was close to him. Furious, Harry storms off to his room and immediately calls his father Fred, an optometrist. Harry vents about what happened, and Fred calmly assures him they'll talk once he gets home. Later that day, Fred returns and takes Harry to his workshop. Inside, we see something unusual. Fred has carefully built a detailed miniature version of Holland, complete with tiny houses and a working model railroad. As they work, Fred tells his son that women tend to overreact and advises Harry to keep the peace at home. Harry listens quietly and nods. That evening at dinner, Nancy once again brings up her missing earrings, clearly still upset. Fred barely reacts. Instead, he casually mentions that he'll be traveling to Frankenmuth for a one-night work conference. Nancy doesn't like this news, but she says nothing. Sensing the tension, Harry steps in and apologizes to his mother. For the first time that night, Nancy finally smiles, and the dinner ends on a calm note. The following day, we learn that Nancy works as a teacher at Holland High School. After her classes end, she catches up with her colleague, Dave, and vents about the nanny, still convinced the girl stole her earring. Dave finds the story strange, pointing out that it doesn't make sense to steal just one earring and leave the other behind. The conversation soon shifts to Fred's supposed work conference. Dave mentions that he actually has an eye appointment with Fred later that week, and casually asks when exactly Fred will be out of town. That night, Nancy's unease grows. She calls the motel where Fred is supposed to be staying, but the receptionist tells her something odd. No one is answering the phone in Fred's room. Unable to sleep, Nancy goes to her husband's workshop. As she searches through one of the drawers, she finds a box of Polaroid film. There are no photos inside, and that detail immediately raises her suspicion. The next day, while checking Fred's pants, Nancy finds a parking ticket from Madison. Her heart sinks. Just then, Fred walks in, and she confronts him about why he didn't answer her call the night before. Fred shrugs it off, saying he must have been in the shower. Later at school, Nancy opens up to Dave once again. She tells him she's starting to believe her husband is having an affair. She explains about the Polaroid film, even though they don't own a Polaroid camera, and reveals that Fred had lied about where he was. He wasn't in the town he claimed to be. Dave is stunned. He struggles to understand how someone like Fred could betray a woman as beautiful as Nancy. Over the next few days, doubt consumes Nancy. Her thoughts keep circling back to the same question, making it hard for her to focus on anything else. Things only get worse when Fred announces yet another business trip, this time for 3 days. Still, Nancy says nothing. Without solid proof, she keeps her suspicions to herself. The following day, she meets Dave at a diner. That's when Nancy shares a risky idea, breaking into her husband's office. She's convinced the missing Polaroid photos are hidden there, and she's determined to find them. With Dave's eye appointment coming up, Nancy asks him for a favor. She wants him to slip into the clinic's bathroom, crack open the window, but leave it looking shut so she can get inside later. Dave hesitates. The plan makes him uncomfortable. But when Nancy gently touches his hand and reassures him, he finally agrees. That evening, Nancy casually tells Fred that she plans to go out with her friend Gwen on Friday. Fred barely reacts and gives his approval without a second thought. Friday afternoon arrives, and Dave shows up for his eye checkup. During the exam, Fred notices that Dave's insurance is being covered by Holland High School. He casually points out that Dave must know his wife, since she also works there. Dave freezes. Clearly nervous, he lies and says he's new in town and doesn't know her. After the test, Dave heads to the bathroom and carefully cracks the window, just enough to look closed. But the moment rattles him, especially when he spots a police officer standing nearby. Panicked, Dave leaves the clinic immediately, refusing to continue the appointment. Later, he meets Nancy and tells her he's backing out of the plan. He even claims he has a date that night. The excuse visibly hurts Nancy, and guilt washes over Dave. He admits he was lying. One moment leads to another, and the line between them quietly disappears as they begin to kiss. That night, Nancy and Dave arrive outside Fred's office. Dave helps her climb in through the window, then stays outside to keep watch. At the same time, Fred is out at a diner with Harry when he gets an urgent call from Gwen. She panics, saying her son's contact lens is stuck and won't come out, and asks if they can rush to the clinic. Fred agrees immediately and tells her to come right away. Back at the office, Nancy manages to break into a locker. Inside, she finds an envelope packed with multiple credit cards. The discovery catches her off guard. Outside, Dave waits nervously in his car. That's when he sees Fred arriving with Gwen and her son. Realizing how close things are getting, he quickly calls Nancy. Inside, Nancy has just opened a strange Polaroid album. It's filled with unsettling photos of houses, including one showing a woman standing beside a sign that reads, "Bologna Queen." Before she can make sense of it, Dave urges her to leave immediately. Moments later, Nancy hears Fred's voice nearby. With no time to think, she escapes through the office window just in time. After treating Gwen's son, Fred casually brings up the supposed trip Nancy was meant to take with Gwen. Gwen looks confused and says they never planned anything like that. Fred freezes, instantly realizing something is wrong. Elsewhere, Nancy and Dave give in to the tension between them and share an intense moment. Back at the clinic, Fred enters his office and notices something that stops him cold: a piece of Nancy's jewelry lying on the floor. The next morning, Nancy calls Fred's credit card company and learns that he recently made an expensive purchase at a jewelry store. Her doubts return, and she starts wondering if the gift was meant for someone else. Soon after, her attention drifts to a jar filled with old buttons. As she searches through it, she suddenly finds her missing earring. The realization leaves her shaken. Moments later, Nancy finds a jewelry box waiting for her in the bedroom, a gift from Fred. When Fred arrives home, he calmly tells Nancy that he knows she didn't go out with Gwen the night before. He doesn't question where she was. Instead, he speaks about the importance of keeping peace in the family. He says he wants things to return to how they were and asks for her trust. Overwhelmed with guilt, Nancy apologizes and promises to do better. In the days that follow, she tries hard to repair her relationship with Fred. She plays the role of the perfect wife and mother, but no matter how hard she tries, she can't stop thinking about Dave. One evening, Nancy finally reaches her breaking point. She gathers the courage to call Dave and breaks down, confessing that she wants to leave her husband. She says she feels trapped and suffocated in the marriage. Dave listens, clearly moved, but he urges caution. He warns her that if she leaves Fred for him, the entire town will turn against them, and she could even lose Harry. Instead, he suggests they first gather solid proof of Fred's affair, something they can use against him. The idea excites Nancy, and she agrees immediately. A few days later, Fred leaves for yet another trip. Nancy asks a friend to look after Harry, and then she and Dave quietly follow Fred as he drives out of town. Along the way, they watch him stop at several stores, buying different items. After hours on the road, Fred finally pulls up to a hotel and heads inside. Dave follows him, while Nancy stays behind. Moments later, her phone buzzes with a message from Fred, telling her he's staying in room 307. Later that evening, Dave tracks Fred to a bar. Meanwhile, Nancy approaches the hotel reception, confidently posing as Fred's wife, and manages to get a key to his room. Inside, she begins going through the bags Fred bought earlier. What she finds leaves her stunned: a pair of handcuffs, men's underwear, and dog treats. Trying to stay calm, Nancy quickly takes photos of everything. At the bar, Fred gets ready to leave. Dave strikes up a casual conversation and invites him for a drink, but Fred doesn't recognize him and politely declines. The moment Fred walks away, Dave calls Nancy, urging her to put everything back exactly as it was and get out immediately. Later, Nancy shows Dave the photos. She's convinced that Fred is hiding some disturbing secret. As the tension between them builds, the two share a kiss and end up spending the night together in the car. The next morning, Nancy wakes up and realizes she needs to head back home to pick up Harry. Dave, however, isn't satisfied. He believes the photos aren't strong enough proof and decides to stay behind, hoping to catch Fred with another woman. Nancy agrees with the plan and drives back to town on her own. Once home, Nancy wanders into Fred's workshop and takes a closer look at his miniature town. That's when something stops her cold. Written on one of the model houses are the words, Lacey Ann for Bologna Queen. Disturbed, Nancy immediately looks up the name online and manages to find a phone number. But when she calls, her fear turns into horror. She learns that Lacey Ann went missing 3 years ago, and her body was later discovered. Elsewhere, Dave spots Fred leaving the hotel and follows him at a distance. Back at home, Nancy begins digging through Fred's architectural plans. On the back of several pages, she finds a series of numbers. When she compares them to the parking ticket she found earlier, a chilling pattern emerges. The numbers are zip codes of places Fred has traveled to. Desperate for answers, Nancy rushes to the library and searches each zip code one by one. With every result, her dread grows stronger. In each of those areas, women have been reported missing or found dead under mysterious circumstances. Meanwhile, Dave follows Fred deep into a wooded area where Fred pulls up to a secluded house. Dave watches as Fred greets a woman at the door and casually hands treats to several dogs inside. Carefully, Dave records everything, convinced he's finally found proof. Then, driven by curiosity, he decides to enter the cabin himself. Back in town, Nancy finally understands how dangerous her husband truly is. Panicked, she tries calling Dave to warn him, but he doesn't answer. Inside the cabin, Dave hears low groaning coming from another room. Holding his camera tightly, he moves toward the sound and slowly opens the door. What he sees turns his stomach. Fred is inside, coldly slitting the woman's throat. Before Dave can react, Fred notices him. A violent struggle breaks out. Fred grabs Dave by the throat, but Dave manages to slash him with the knife and breaks free. Injured but relentless, Fred charges after him. The two crash through a window and tumble outside. Bleeding heavily, Fred stares at Dave and calmly says, "So you do know my wife." Dave realizes he's stabbed Fred in the stomach. Shaken, he mutters an apology and runs, but Fred refuses to stop. Dave reaches the lake dock, thinking he's escaped, when Fred suddenly appears again. As Fred moves in for the final blow, Dave turns and drives the knife into him once more. Losing a massive amount of blood, Fred stumbles backward and collapses into the water, sinking beneath the surface. Fred is dead. The next day, Dave returns to Holland and meets Nancy, who is already panicking over everything she's discovered. Dave confirms her worst fear. Fred was a killer, but he quickly reassures her that she's safe now. Fred is gone, and he's never coming back. Dave tells her he confronted Fred with the evidence and made sure he disappeared from their lives for good. He suggests that the three of them leave town immediately. But Nancy hesitates. Vanishing overnight would raise too many questions. Instead, she suggests they wait until the Tulip Festival, when the town is distracted, and leave right after. Over the next few days, they try to carry on as if everything is normal. Nancy lives in constant fear that Fred might somehow return, while Dave is haunted by nightmares of what happened at the cabin. One night, unable to sleep, Dave digs up a gun he buried in his backyard, preparing himself for whatever might come next. A few days later, the day of the Tulip Festival finally arrives, and the entire town comes together to celebrate. Nancy is there as well, trying to stay calm until her peace is suddenly shattered. Neighbors casually mention that her husband has returned from his trip. Nancy is immediately shaken. She insists that it's impossible, but they're certain they saw Fred earlier that day. As the festival continues, Harry performs a dance with the other children, briefly lifting Nancy's spirits. After the performance, Nancy goes looking for her son and unexpectedly runs into Dave. Grabbing her hand, he urgently tells her that Fred is at the festival and that they need to leave immediately. Nancy snaps at him to let go and pulls away, heading straight for Harry. The two rush to a nearby motel, where Nancy locks every door and window, trying to keep them safe. Not long after, Dave shows up at the motel and insists that Nancy let him in. Frustrated and overwhelmed, she first locks Harry inside one of the rooms, warning him not to come out no matter what. Nancy hesitates at the door. Desperate, Dave finally tells her the full truth. He explains how he witnessed Fred brutally murder a woman, how they fought, and how he believed Fred drowned in the lake afterward. But somehow, Fred has returned. Shocked and furious, Nancy finally opens the door, confronting Dave for lying to her. Dave insists he wants to fix everything, and says the only option now is to go to the police. But Nancy stops him, convinced that involving the authorities would destroy Harry's life. As they argue, both reach for the phone. In the struggle, Nancy accidentally strikes Dave on the head, injuring him. After apologizing, a shaken Nancy rushes to find her son. But Harry is nowhere in sight. Panicked, she steps outside. To her shock, she sees Harry calmly sitting by the lakeside with his father. Fred gently tells Harry to wait in the car, promising they'll be heading home soon. Once they're alone, Fred speaks calmly, but his words cut deep. He tells Nancy he's disappointed in her actions. He insists he never crossed any boundaries in their marriage. She did. Then, in a chilling shift, Fred claims that the man responsible for those murders isn't his real self. According to him, his real self exists only with his family. He suggests they start over, reset everything, go back to being the perfect family they once were. Knowing that resisting him could make things worse, Nancy gets into the car with Fred and Harry. As Fred begins driving, Nancy suddenly points out that Harry hasn't fastened his seatbelt and demands they pull over. Fred hesitates, but Nancy raises her voice and forces him to stop. She turns to Harry and screams for him to run. The moment Harry is gone, Nancy pulls out a gun and points it at her husband. Fred remains disturbingly calm. He tells her that without him, Harry's life will fall apart, that he'll end up in foster care, alone and broken. But this time, Nancy doesn't hesitate. A brutal struggle follows. Fred's face is badly injured, yet he still fights back, trying to strangle her. Refusing to give in, Nancy grabs one of her heels and strikes him again and again, until Fred finally collapses, motionless in a pool of blood. The nightmare is over. Nancy rushes back to the motel, only to find that Dave is gone. The film ends with Nancy and her son left alone, survivors of a nightmare that has permanently changed their lives, carrying the weight of horrors they will never truly escape. If you enjoyed this explanation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more movie recaps. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.